Hey guys, it's Rod with Civil Advantage Firearms Training here. Today we're going to do a supplementary video on the secure transport of non-restricted and restricted firearms. So today's pretty much a not so frequently asked questions video. Basically, I did those other videos, as you guys know, and I got a couple of extra questions. Plus, I had a couple of unanswered questions of my own. And what I did was I contacted the Canadian Firearms Center. I talked to two different firearms officers and kind of aggregated what my understanding of what they had to say about some of these not so frequently asked questions were, and I wanted to make a video and pass these on to you, and hopefully it's useful. What my goal is with these videos is to keep you guys out of trouble and to help you not get your firearm seized, both illegally and legally, right? So anyway, so the disclaimer here is none of this constitutes legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I don't work for the Firearms Center other than being a Canadian Firearm Safety Course instructor. So what my opinion is, like, it's meaningless to them. Well, Rod from Civil Advantage told me this. They were like, who, Rod? Is he an instructor? You know, they don't care, right? So if I were to give you any real advice, it is to understand the law very clearly yourself, not depend on anyone else to understand it for you. Read the law several times yourself. Know it cold, even the sections, so you can quote the sections should you come across someone that doesn't maybe know the law as well as some other people like me or you might. You'll be able to say, listen, in section so-and-so, this is what it says, and it's commonly interpreted as this. So know the law really well, abide by the law, and exceed it by just a little bit. That's my advice to you, is understand the law and exceed it by just a little bit, and then you'll always be okay. It's when you try to get right down to the wire, or you try to create your own interpretation of the law and, like, well, in my eyes, this is a gun safe, you know, a little padlock, or, you know, that's when you're going to get in trouble. So anyway, all that aside, the regulations change constantly. You know, all kinds of different people interpret laws different. So stay you know, abreast of any changes. Call the Firearms Center if you have any questions. Get real legal advice should you get into trouble from a lawyer. This is not legal advice. Okay, so from the discussion that I had, one thing I wanted to pass on to you guys was that I understand a little bit what the firearms position on things are, and the role of intent in the regulations. So what do I mean by intent? Basically, should you get into trouble, the RCMP, the Crown, and the Firearms Center, should they be consulted? They really don't play a role when you get into trouble, only you know, for certain things. But should you be pulled over and you haven't been transporting your firearm properly, the role of intent is really important. Did you were you attempting to comply with the law and then you forgot something, or were you attempting to comply with the law and then things happen beyond your control? So intent has everything to do with everything. Now, keep that in mind as we go through this. First thing is, let's clarify what the purpose of the long-term ATT is. And this is going to answer a lot of questions if you understand what that purpose is. So the purpose of the long-term ATT is that you can shoot your gun, you can have your gun worked on or fixed, because they want you to maintain your firearms in good working order. So long-term ATT allows you to take it to a licensed gunsmith basically whenever you want. And it also allows you to go to the United States. So to any border crossing within your region. For me, it's, you know, the Yukon and British Columbia, and there's border crossings in the north, as you know, with Alaska, and there's border crossings in the south. So that's the role of the long-term ATT. It's so that you can go about your normal business without having to consult the government every time you want to move the firearm. That's the intent. So here we go. Just keep that in mind. All right. So first question, and this was my question actually that I kept forgetting to ask, but finally I asked them. If I have a long-term ATT that allows me to go from my home to a licensed gunsmith, and as you guys may know, long-term ATTs are not specific to firearms. Short-term ATTs are not usually specific to firearms. They're anybody's firearms, yours or anyone else's, and any one of your firearms. So if I have a long-term ATT that allows me to go to a licensed gunsmith and home, what happens if I make a new purchase of a firearm and the store has a licensed gunsmith? do I still need a short-term ATT? Because there's no waiting period in Canada to buy a restricted firearm. It's instantaneous. Just has to be registered. That's it, right? So the answer is yes, you still need a short-term ATT. Now let's go back to what I said about the long-term ATT just now, and this is how it was explained to me, is that the long-term ATT was meant for you to have your firearms, go shoot them, so you don't have to tell people every time you go. That's not the reason why you went to the store. You went to the store to purchase a new firearm, so that's why you need a short-term ATT there to get the firearm to your home. So if you guys have done a new purchase, you know, basically you go there, you buy the gun, they register it right there with the firearm center on the phone, and they'll send you a short-term ATT. So yeah, you cannot use your long-term ATT for a new purchase, even if they have a licensed gunsmith in the store. Also, ATT required to borrow restricted firearms. So, as you might know, you can borrow restricted firearms. You can borrow unlimited amounts of restricted firearms. If you need a trailer to haul them, that's okay. But when you borrow a restricted firearm, you have to borrow the registration certificate as well. Now, your buddy has a restricted firearm. You want to borrow it. So you're going to have to drive to your buddy's house to get that firearm. You're going to need a short-term ATT to do that. They kind of want to know, hey, where are these, who's got possession of all these firearms, although it's not in legislation, it's not in the regulations either. So they're saying you need a short-term ATT to get it. So I say, well, hey, I've got a short-term ATT or a long-term ATT to go from my home to the shooting club. And maybe I want to borrow a firearm from another member of the club. Well, I'll just meet him at the club. He's got a long-term ATT to get there. I got a long-term ATT to get there. Boom, we're there. He gives me the registration certificate for the firearm. I take the firearm and the registration certificate and I go home. We're covered. Now, the role of intent pops up in here again. So the intent is that I went to the range to shoot my guns. Or I went to the range without a firearm for whatever reason. But I see my buddy, and he says, "Hey, if you want to borrow it, you can borrow it," and that's fine. My ATT does cover me to transport restricted firearms, whether they're mine or not, as long as I have the paperwork, the registration for the firearm, my PAL, and a long-term authorization to transport. But if my intent was to go there to meet him to borrow that firearm, then I'm contravening the intent of my long-term ATT. So now, how's anybody going to say, well, you intended to borrow the firearm? I don't know, right? I'm letting you know why sometimes they're saying, hey, if you're going to borrow a firearm, you need a short term. So it's up to you if by accident you say, hey, I'd sure love to shoot that M&P 9mm that you have. Should I see you at the range in 25 minutes? I spontaneously decided to borrow that from you. I don't think that they'd have a hard time proving that was your intent. So anyway, that's all I'm saying there. But just so you know, if you want to stick to the letter of the law, get a short-term ATT to borrow firearms as well. Might even be easier because you can go right to their house and you're all legal the whole way and back, right? Last thing for secure transport of restricted firearms is I got a question, are soft cases okay? So as you know, when you want to transport a restricted firearm, it has to be unloaded, it has to have a secure locking device on it, and it has to be in a locked case or a locked box. The law states it as a securely locked container that's not easily broken into. So now I tried to get a little guidance on this, but even the firearm center is kind of like, well, hey, you realize that none of this constitutes legal advice, right? I'm like, well, where am I going to find the legal advice? I thought you guys were the guys, right? But anyway, apparently they're not. Everybody's hands off. No one wants to be held responsible for someone's life getting ruined by a frivolous, ridiculous firearms charge. But anyway, here's what the advice was. Soft cases would be okay, but they would have to be like heavy-duty Cordura. And of course the zippers have to be locked. But I guess they're proof, and this is only like a working understanding. This is not the law that says, this is not meeting the minimum requirements or anything. But one thing that was said to me was, if it requires a tool to get the case open, then it meets their minimum requirements. Now remember, if it meets the firearm center's minimum requirements, that means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. You can still get charged and still get convicted, right? Because at the end of the day, who decides? It's the judge. Not Rod from Civil Advantage Firearms Training, not, you know, Joe from the Firearms Center, not, you know, Barry Smith, the RCMP member that pulls you over for the broken taillight or response to the car accident where your car flipped over and they have to search for alcohol or whatever and they find guns. It's none of those people, it's the judge. And by the time you got to the judge, guys, by the time you get there, you're already into this thing for $7 grand. And that's my, you know, that's my position on all this stuff. So if you want to meet or exceed the law, get a hard case. If it has 3 positions for locks on it, take 3 combination locks. I use the locks I use aren't very big, but they're sturdy. And I put, if there's 3 places for lock, I put 3 locks on it. Because I'm showing my intent. So should I ever end up in front of the judge, I'm like, what do you want from me, man? There's 3 places for locks. I even bought 3 locks, you know? Yeah, you can get in the case with a chop saw or you know, or by smashing the case in the ground super hard, but I mean, like, it's not easily broken into, and I took every precaution I possibly could. Make sure that you have your gun unloaded. Make sure that you have the secure locking device on it too. I mean, that's, you know, can't talk your way out of that. So hopefully there's some questions there that got answered. Hopefully there's some thought process there too. And as you guys know, you know, I can't control the law. I can't control the implementation of the law, but I can recommend just based on my experience and try to help you not get into trouble. So exceed the law just by a little bit and don't try to skirt it and say, well, here's my tiny little lock. You know, hey, it was locked. You're just going to get yourself into trouble. And big picture, guys, it's not really that much more inconvenient to take 3 locks off instead of 1 or 2, right? It takes an extra, you know, 5 seconds. So do yourself a favor and just exceed and stay on the safe side, on the white side of gray, as we like to say. Anyway, I hope that helps. If you have questions, you can feel free to put them in the comments. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, please do so at Civil Advantage 1. And if you want to find us on the web, of course, you can find us just like all the other videos at www.civiladvantage.com. Thanks, and we will see you next time.